It's great to be here, and it's great to see all you there. And gosh, I hope you have questions. And if you want to argue about anything I'm going to say today, have at it. Let's take the gloves off. As Jay said, I was a golf course superintendent, but what he didn't say was I was a public golf course superintendent. Now, this is Southern California, and I will confess that we counted 9 holes and 18-hole rounds as a round, so there was no differentiation. But at Rio Hondo, just outside of LA, we used to do 115,000 rounds a year. And when you think of that in Northeast terms, you say, how could you possibly get those numbers? Well, we played 365 days a year. So the only reason I mention that is because I do understand what public golf is all about. It's very different than private golf. In some cases, you're worried about green speed or green firmness or this or that in a private setting. In the public golf setting, sometimes you're just worried about getting the greens mowed. That is a big accomplishment. So I understand kind of your mindset, I guess, at a public facility. My daughter actually calls me a grass nerd, so maybe that'll put things in a different perspective as well. I am going to talk about grass, but a little bit more than that. I started talking about sustainability in turf, I don't know, probably about 10 months ago. And little did I know at that time that I would be talking about it all year long because of different reasons. We did not have a lot of winter injury in this area of the country, a little bit, but if you went further north, if you tried to play golf this spring in upstate New York, the upper Midwest, northern Pennsylvania, southern Canada, northern New England, you would not have been met with very favorable conditions. We had devastating turf loss, and it could happen here tomorrow. It happened in this area several times in the last 25 years. The last really bad year for winter injury was 1994. I remember it very, very well. We had an ice storm in January and it caused catastrophic turf loss at many, many golf courses. And the reason I bring that up is because what we're doing in many cases just isn't really sustainable. We can do it for short term, we can do it for a longer period of time, but sooner or later, with our current model of turf management, people are going to be unsuccessful. So I'll talk more about that as we go. Now, most of the time we talk about sustainability in golf, we're thinking about environmental or economic, and that certainly makes sense. That's sort of the traditional view of, or thought, I guess, of sustainability. But because it is a game, I think you have to also throw in the enjoyment factor. Most of us in this room probably derive our livelihood from the game, but it is a game and it's got to be fun, and we have to keep that in the back of our mind as we go about dealing with the problems golf is facing. So what started the discussion? Well, geez, all the problems that Jay mentioned. But I would start even further back with the environmental movement of the 1980s. That was when golf really attracted a lot of close scrutiny. What are you guys doing to the environment? Is it good? Is it bad? We think you're polluting. And golf at that time really had no answers. And the USGA, fortunately, under the leadership of Jim Snow, our former national director of green section, the USGA funded a tremendous amount of environmental research. And eventually this research has shown that golf has a very good environmental story to tell. But that was, we didn't have the answer in the 80s. So that was, I think, some of the beginnings of the pressure that golf started to feel. The economic downturn, in the late 2000s certainly was a big part of it. And of course the decline in participation in rounds and all those sorts of things. Conversions of private clubs to public, and lots of courses everywhere going out of business. So all of these things are related to the issues that we're facing today. The other big thing is water usage. I just spent a 7-day vacation on the West Coast, and boy, if you think we've got problems in this area, the water issues on the West Coast are mind-boggling. They're so dry, courses are going out of business because they don't have water, or they cannot afford to purchase the water to make the turf, to keep the turf alive, actually. This is not a new thing. We've had historic droughts many times in the past, in the 70s in California, in the late 90s, early 2000s in the Northeast region, in the late 2000s in the Southeast region. So it's a big issue, and it's hard to get people in the Northeast region excited about water issues because we traditionally don't have so many of them. We generally have adequate water and good water quality. That is not the case for every region of the country, and it's not always going to be the case for us. As population continues to increase, there's just always going to be more and more pressure on our water supply. So Jim Hyler, our former USGA president in 2010 at the annual meeting, made this statement, brown is the new green, and boy did that get a lot of attention. It really got a lot of attention. It caused most people to think, oh, we need to shut the water off, play brown, dry, firm and fast conditions. And that's really not what he meant with that. His thoughts were definitely shaped by the drought that he experienced in the southeast region. And so it also does sort of refer back to playing conditions, the desire of being firm and fast. But that statement really is all about sustainability and everything we do on a golf course, how we use inputs, how we spend our money, what kind of playability we're after, and all those other things. So it really refers more to sustainability. Now, I did not take this picture, but I will confess, when I was driving on a Northern California freeway last week, I saw a billboard that said, brown is the new green. And so we're seeing this statement all over the place, not just in turf, not in golf necessarily, but sort of, again, referring to sustainability and wise use of natural resources of all types. So Jay kind of hit on this. I think golf has a tendency to rely on legacy thinking. We've always done it this way. It's always worked, so we're going to keep doing it this way. It's worked in the past, and that's an easy trap to fall into with golf because golf has so many great traditions. To me, it's one of the big attractions to the game. I love the history. I love old golf courses. I love learning about the history and the traditions of them. And golf has had a great run until a few years ago when all these problems started to kind of snowball. And to me, I think it's a case of everyone in the game sort of taking their eye off the ball, so to speak. We concentrated on building courses and promoting the game, but we really didn't work on the infrastructure very much. We didn't work on attracting and recruiting and being prepared for an economic downturn when it would eventually come. So that's all hindsight. But I think in essence, I think golf as a group, as a whole, has really become complacent. We assumed that the players would always keep coming, the members would always keep coming, the turnstile would keep ringing, et cetera, et cetera. And now that we've got these issues, it's a bad thing, but it's also a good thing because we're facing them head on and we're doing research, we're looking for answers, and we'll find them. Golf is going to make a great rebound, I have no doubt about it in my mind, but we need to pay a few dues and work on it. We have to implement solutions. And so for all of these reasons, it's more important than ever to talk about sustainability. And I hate using a buzzword like sustainability, but I think it so accurately describes what we need to do that it's important to use it. So as it pertains to turf, well, our inputs have gone up. We've gotten, and to me this is the essence of our problem in turf, we've gotten really, really good at keeping wheatgrass alive. And if you went further north in this area back in the spring, you would realize we had a lot of weak turf because Poa annua, or annual bluegrass, was the grass that was lost as a result of the winter injury. We can keep it alive most years. We've gotten very good at doing that with our techniques, our practices, our products, our strategies. But there's always going to be that one year, and it could be in the winter, it could be in the summer, where we will not be successful in keeping it alive. And then the resulting cost of keeping it alive, or the resulting devastation when you lose it all, the disruption to your revenue stream, play, et cetera, it's devastating. So we need to rethink how we do that. I think collectively we waste a ridiculous amount of money on overindulgent cosmetics. That's my new favorite term. Last winter my favorite term was polar vortex. Hopefully we won't relive that one this coming year. Now it's overindulgent cosmetics because I think that really encapsulates a lot of the funny things that you see on golf courses. So in essence I'm saying that we're pampering our golfers, we're pampering our turf, and that's not good for the game. I don't think anyone would argue this point. Golf costs too much? Of course it does. And green sells, and you can take this two ways. Green is the color, it sells. Most golfers equate green to being good and not green to being not good. But from the environmental standpoint, green is a big selling point now. People like to most golfers consider themselves environmentalists, so being conservation-minded is a good thing on a golf course. I think that's a concept that can sell to a lot of golfers. Quality unquestionably sells. And here's one of the dilemmas that we reach. When you're talking about turf grass management and maintenance equipment, this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's true more times than not. Smaller and lighter with respect to equipment almost always equates to better turf. Smaller equipment causes less injury to the turf, less soil compaction, less wear and tear, less stress, and so the turf always performs better, almost always. The problem with that is smaller and lighter means more expense because you need more equipment, the equipment is not as efficient, you need more operators, and it takes longer to get all of the different processes accomplished on a golf course. So smaller and lighter means better turf, better stress tolerance, better reliability when it comes to turf, but it means more expense. Education clearly is needed, and I love this statement. Excuse me. This has been on a radio ad in Pennsylvania for 2 years now, and every time I hear it, I grind my teeth. I have no idea what they're talking about. But the ad says, "Come to my golf course, we've got bluegrass fairways with bent grass landing areas." I do not know what that means. But I'm playing golf Sunday at this course with a bunch of my friends, and I will report back if anyone would like to know. To me, this is just an awful message. I don't know what it means, and I've spent my entire life in golf. So if I don't understand, there's a lot of other people that don't understand. And this just is an indication of how much education is needed for golfers. And the USGA is working really hard on that. If there's one thing from my presentation that you get out of this today, actually two things, I'd say remember overindulgent cosmetics and look at everything on your golf course in the eyes of, with that in mind. And then go to our website. If you haven't done this, go to across the top course care and then down to green section record. Click on that and you can subscribe free to our online magazine. It comes out every 2 weeks. USGA is putting in a tremendous amount of effort, in the green section in particular, a tremendous amount of effort into educating golfers on turf grass management and all things related to golf course management. It's a free magazine. It comes out every 2 weeks. It's got specific information on every area of the country, as well as lots of educational articles and videos, whatnot, about everything related to golf course management. So please do that. Now, I wish I could say that I coined the term overindulgent cosmetics, but I didn't. Ron Whitten did a few years ago, and it was when Golf Digest changed their rating system, how they rank golf courses, and they took out maintenance of that because they really felt like they were putting too much emphasis on the aesthetics and the glitz, the eye candy that goes into golf course management and presentation. And so they identified that as a great feature not to concentrate on, and I'd like to just take that and go throughout the whole golf course. What is it? Well, I think it's different things to different people. I think overindulgent cosmetics are different things on different golf courses. Wall-to-wall irrigation, I would call that an overindulgent cosmetic. Having green or lush turf. Lush is a 4-letter word, and that is, for me, like fingernails on a chalkboard. When I hear people describing courses being lush, that's as big an insult as you could give to me if it were my golf course. That, I think, is an overindulgent cosmetic. It's not good for the turf. It is not good for playability. Pampering the turf, pampering the golfers. So flower beds on the golf course. I would even throw ball washers into an overindulgent cosmetic. Here's a thought. You guys all have ball washers on your golf course. Do you ever think about why they're on the tee? If they're on the tee, that means you just putted with a dirty golf ball. Why don't we put them on the green? Doesn't make sense. Ball washers are expensive to put out in the spring, take in the fall, to maintain during the summer. I think they're an unnecessary addition to many golf courses, and they clutter up a golf course. So what are some of the other things? Mowing patterns, stripe mowing patterns, that's eye candy. It's more expensive to stripe when you're mowing when you're mowing fairways, as opposed to going back and forth or black and white. I'll show you that in just a second. Grooming our bunkers, that is an overindulgent cosmetic. Trying to achieve consistency. Now, in USGA championships, We want our greens consistent with respect to speed and firmness, relatively speaking, but we're not after perfect consistency on other areas of the golf course. Rough, we prefer not to have them so consistent. Even on fairways at Pinehurst, if you watched the Open this year, we did not have consistent playing conditions in the fairways. In general, the best playing conditions were in the center line of the fairways, and they got progressively firmer and drier, and the lines got a little bit cuppier on the perimeters of the fairways. So you can spend a horrendous amount of money trying to make everything perfectly consistent. It isn't good for the game, and it's obviously a waste of money. The challenge with all of these things, and many, many others, is to differentiate between what's important, what's good for the game, and what's truly an overindulgent cosmetic. And I think that, as I said earlier, that definition will change from course to course. Now, I know we can save some money by changing our mowing strategies. I'm guessing that many of your courses have already taken these steps. You know, maybe you've cut down unneeded fairway acreage. I'm going to come back to that in just a second, because I don't think that's always a good thing. Most courses now, or many courses now, are not removing clippings from fairways when they're being mowed as we used to do. It's better for the turf to remove them, but it's a big expense. It slows down the mowing operation, and clippings are fertilizer. You put them back. If you don't collect them, it actually reduces your fertility requirements. So we can certainly alter our mowing patterns, and we can get rid of certain things, like maybe the courtesy cut, and certainly the intermediate cut around the perimeter of fairways. But if we're trying to attract new golfers and we're trying to cater to higher handicappers, are narrow fairways a good thing? Well, they save us money with fairway maintenance, but I would argue that they're not really good for playability. And if you look at USGA championships, more and more often we have wider and wider fairways. Now, last year's Open Championship at Marion was an exception. We had very small fairways there. But this year's Open at Pinehurst, the fairways were far and away larger than they've ever been when the Open has been held at Pinehurst. And when you look at future Open sites, Chambers Bay, for certainly Shinnecock in 2018 and Wingfoot in 2020, fairways will be wider than they've ever been when we've held an Open Championship at those courses. Wider fairways for a good player adds strategy, because you give them alternate lines of play and they can make choices. Wider fairways are good for high handicappers, because the fairways are too hard to hit anyway. I put myself in that category. The other thing is, when you have wide bands of rough around bunkers, it keeps balls out of the bunkers, and for the high handicapper that is trying to run a ball up the fairway and you have rough sticking out, jutting out into the fairway, it captures those balls and it gives them reduces the distance and makes it a harder recovery shot. So I think if we have wider fairways, that's an area I would tend to increase spending on, because it'll speed up play, it'll be easier for the high-end handicappers. You can make a good argument that it makes for more interesting and thoughtful play for the very good players. The intermediate rough is an absolute waste of time. I'm guessing most of your courses don't have them. If you do, it's the first thing I'd get rid of. We have more turf problems with an intermediate cut of rough. It's a lot of added expense, and it detracts from definition between fairway and rough. So I hit on this mowing pattern thing, and so there's the question: what are those stripes worth? It's a good thing to change mowing direction, because turf tends to get laid over, and you can create grain if you mow it in the same direction all the time. So you do need to switch your directions, but that's not an efficient mowing pattern. If you use the old mowing pattern, this is what we always did years ago when we had gang mowers, because we did not have the ability to strike fairways. It was only until the last 25 or 30 years when we've had smaller fairway mowers that we'd actually strike them. This to me is a cleaner look, saves a lot of money on labor and fuel. So how much? Well, here's an example submitted by a friend of mine. 27-hole golf course, assuming 2 mowers per side, mowing 4 times per week, and mowing 30 times a year. This is actually in New Jersey. Just by switching from striped to black and white mowing pattern, we'd save $17,000. Now that's not very much money in the grand scheme of things, but let's keep playing with this. That's 3 times a week. What if we just decide to mow 2 times a week? Now we're saving $30,000 a year. That's getting a little bit more significant. And what if we go to gang mowers? Now, you probably don't want to do this, because quality will suffer. If you're looking at the turf there, you see some green and a lot of brown. That's because a lot of the grass died. That's the reason we went to smaller and lighter mowers, kind of tying up back to that point I made earlier. But if we went back to these gang mowers, we could cut our labor by 50%. So it's always a cost and benefit ratio or decision you have to go through when you determine what's important, what's not. Smaller and lighter equipment, to some degree, is very important. You'll have much better turf, much better reliability, and much better playability. But you're going to pay a little bit more money for it. We could switch to robots. Now, some of you are looking at this thinking, what's he talking about now? This is actually being done now. I've been hearing about it, but I'm going to show you a video in a minute, but here's the plan for this golf course in western Pennsylvania. One man with 2 of these units, total cost of about $10,000, can mow 9 holes in the morning. And while he is setting up the mowers and they are mowing the greens, he can do the other course setup operations. So it's going to save this club quite a bit of money. It's another 27-hole facility. The plan next year is to buy 4 more of these units, and they're going to go to robot mowing of their putting green turf. They actually get the same or better playability. They actually mow a little higher height of cut. The unit kind of rolls the turf because it's fairly heavy, so they're getting a mow and a roll essentially every day, and it can be fit to any manufacturer's cutting end. So any different mower, whether it's Toro, Jacobson, John Deere, what have you. And it can be painted in any color so that it matches. Now here's a video of it doing the cleanup pass. Has anybody ever mowed the cleanup pass around a green? A couple people have. If you're a 1/4 inch off, your green's gotten smaller or you've scalped into the collar. So what are some other areas where we could save money? Bunker maintenance. I think everybody's done this. Gosh, I don't know any course that are mowing around their bunkers, trimming around their bunkers, or raking them as often as they did a few years ago. Great way to save money. I think in many cases we just need to look at reducing the number of bunkers. That's certainly going to help with pace of play, and to long-term to build less intricate bunkers. They're very expensive. Some people define them as a hazard. I guess we do at the USJ define them as a prepared area, usually depression, et cetera, et cetera. The actual definition of a bunker is a hole in the ground you pour money into, very much like a boat and pouring money into the hole in the water. Bunkers are expensive. They can add a lot, but if you want to cut expense, that's a good area to look at. I've got some more overindulgent cosmetics. It drives me nuts. Some surveys show that 70% of golfers now take golf carts. So why do we spend so much money putting benches on our golf course? And go back to the ball washers. Do we really need as many ball washers as we have out there? They're very expensive. One course I know, 36-hole facility, they have 55 ball washers. That just to purchase them is $27,000, almost $28,000, and then it's daily maintenance and then a tremendous amount of annual maintenance. Bring them in, taking them out, painting, repainting, et cetera, ton of money. Oh, and what about flower beds and all of those other things on golf courses? I'm guessing most of you don't have these things on your golf courses. And my degree in college was horticulture, so it's not that I don't like flowers, I very much do. Landscape plantings are terrific, but they don't need to be on our golf course. They clutter them up. They're another opportunity for golf course superintendents to look bad, because you can never devote enough time to them to have them look good, so they're perpetually looking bad. To me, they're just all distractive clutter and a built-in problem. There's some other built-in problems. Again, built-in problem or opportunity to look bad, there's tons of them. Cart paths without curb. If you have to use ropes all the time, you have all kinds of problems. The expense of purchasing, installing, continually straightening. Doesn't matter how sharp the ropes look, as soon as one group goes through and moves them, they don't put them back. It looks like you didn't do your job in the first place. So anything you can do to get rid of course accessories is a good thing. Curbs are a wonderful addition to cart paths if you have to have them. Maintenance intensive features. Why do we need, on a public golf course this is, by the way, landscape timbers on a tee with a landscape timber wall, with shrubs. Look at the maintenance. That's just money to build, money to maintain, and it's silly. It's just not necessary. It doesn't add anything to the golf experience in my mind. So environmental sustainability, I think 25, 30 years ago, we considered this a huge challenge, but golf has done a great job embracing it. And as I said earlier, most golfers are environmentalists, and so we've worked hard to put more nature back in our golf courses through lots of different ways. We have a good story to tell, but we still have a long way to go. Here's a way we can put it back. 30 years ago, this would have been string trimmed to the ground every week or 2 or 3 or 4. And that will lead to more labor and more water quality issues, because all the debris, when you trim it, is going to go into the pond. Now, 30 years ago, I would have looked at that and said, man, that looks pretty weedy. Why don't you get rid of those weeds? Let's string trim that to the ground. And as a result, we wasted a lot of money doing that. And so now, it's almost uncommon to see streams or lakes or other bodies of water without naturalized buffers. There's no reason not to naturalize them. When we cut the vegetation along them, the vegetation goes into the water. That's a nutrient source. It's not good for water quality. When we cut it low enough or long enough, we wind up with erosion problems. That further degrades water quality. It's very expensive to repair. So there's a lot of ways that we can continue to improve our golf courses environmentally, adding naturalized areas, naturalizing stream banks, adding buffer strips along bodies of water, all great things to do. And regardless, from the environmental aspect, we cannot afford to be complacent. We need to be very aware of and take action if we see environmental liability, and we cannot ever break the law when it comes to how we manage our golf courses in all aspects. The typical golfer, they consider themselves environmentalists, but they want green. They don't like dead grass. They typically don't want bad lies anywhere on the property. And they tend to like fast greens, but very receptive greens. And all of that talk about consistency comes into play as well. TV teaches us all this, and that's not really a good thing because it is an outdoor game. Tournament golf isn't sustainable, and that's one of the issues I think that we face in golf. What we see on TV isn't really good for us at the local level, but you just constantly see it channel after channel, championship or tournament after tournament. What is done for a week, a year at a championship or a tour event, what have you, is just not possible. It's not sustainable on a regular basis because we have so many extra resources. I think the assumption in some cases is that golfers want to see birdies, so they make conditions very, very consistent. They favor the player. When you have really good players with really consistent and excellent playability, they make a lot of birdies. And sometimes the poor shots are blamed on the course. Now, in our championships, we try to do things a little bit differently. They're not sustainable either. We conduct 13 national championships. They're very, very challenging. They're for the best players in the world. But to produce the playing conditions that we want for our championships, we bring in volunteers. The turf is managed very intensively, sometimes for several years, many years in advance of the championship. And we place a premium on firmness. We place a premium on consistency with respect to the putting greens, not so much other areas of the course. And we really are looking to test all facets of a player's game. Give them options, make them make decisions, and then let them play the course. We consider it an outdoor game, meaning if you're going to get a bad lie, you're going to get a bad break. That's up to you as a golfer to figure out how to deal with it and respond. So we're doing our best to educate golfers about sustainability. I think you saw some of that at Pinehurst. We heard many very positive responses to the championship at Pinehurst, the Open Championship. Some golfers didn't like it because it was not green. But in terms of playability, I think we achieved everything we hoped to. And the color is really not material. You saw a great deal of inconsistency in that championship, which is a terrific thing, I think, for the game of golf. So our philosophies, test a player's shot-making ability, their course management skills and their recovery skills, all those sorts of things, but get them out of their comfort zone. Don't give them the same lie over and over in every area of the golf course. Vary the setup, and having varying conditions is a good thing. And if it's good for an open championship, why aren't those things good for the average golfer? So why should the average golfer expect the same lie in every area of every fairway or in every area of every rough? It's not realistic, it's not healthy. Frankly, I think it's kind of boring. If you want the same lie every time, maybe we should just go inside and play computer games. Then we can get the exact same lie every time. Bunkers definitely are not intended to be consistent, and it's not that we would trick up a bunker, purposely prepare them differently to create different conditions, but just by definition, bunkers can't be consistent. If you check firmness in a bunker, after they're all prepared in the morning, you'll get one reading, and as soon as one player hits one shot out of the bunker, the firmness, the playing characteristics will change. So there's no way to make them consistent. There's too many variables involved, and why should they be anyway? Certainly are not looking for highly consistent fairways, or roughs rather. With respect to green speed and firmness, green speed gets so much press, and it costs us money in different ways. It's expensive to maintain faster greens, and faster greens oftentimes are less reliable than slower greens. It's a complex system, and I won't go into any great detail, but the courses that experienced problems with winter injury this past winter, farther north in general, were the higher end courses that had higher populations of annual bluegrass. Courses that had lower budgets, that mowed higher, had much higher on average survival rates, and that to me speaks back to sustainability. Speed is fun, firmness is much more important. Golfers tend to value speed very highly, but there's a lot of lousy golfers that can handle faster putting green speeds. There's very few lousy golfers that can handle firm playing conditions. That's a much more effective way to separate talent on the golf course. Firm conditions are much more important than faster conditions. So Pinehurst a few weeks later, you saw what it was like on television. It was brown. Believe it or not, a couple of rain events, green right back up. Now, are we promoting that everywhere? No. Pinehurst is Bermuda grass. I don't know if any of you have ever managed Bermuda grass, but it's very difficult to kill. They have Bermuda grass fairways. They have no car traffic on their fairways. They lost no turf following the championship, during the championship. As a matter of fact, the Bermuda grass is still creeping into their native areas where they consider it a weed and are controlling it. So even after all the stress that you saw during the Open Championship, the Bermuda grass is just fine. Now, could we do what we did at Pinehurst in other areas of the country? Absolutely not. You couldn't do that in the Northeast, nor are we suggesting you should. I think in golf, with respect to turf management, we are our own worst enemies in many cases. The model is this: it's to cut too low, it's to cut too often and keep the turf weak, and we have the ability to keep weaker grasses alive, and when you do that for long enough, you wind up with a much higher percentage of weaker grasses. As I said earlier, there will always be that one year. It could be in the winter or it could be in the summer when we will not be able to keep it alive, and that's when you see a major disruptive event like we just experienced farther north. I don't want to say that it will happen here next year. It certainly could. It may not be for another 10 years or 20 years, but we're going to have one of those events. And if you maintain turf and promote more desirable grasses, more reliable grasses, when those events come, you'll be better able to deal with them. Right now, a bad event like we experienced up north has the significance of being able to push more courses over the edge economically. It certainly did up north, I can tell you that. It's a difficult thing to consider regrassing because that means shutting down in most cases. Most courses are not going to do that. The courses up north actually did that unwillingly. These were the typical conditions we saw last February, March, and April farther north. And so they ended up losing vast amounts of turf. That's the bad news. The good news is that they were able to establish vast amounts of new and improved grasses in their older greens and golf courses, and the result is they're going to come out of this stronger than they did going into it. But you'd like to avoid that if you can, and I think there are a number of things that we can do to help us avoid it. As I mentioned, the most affected areas were greens, greens with the most annual bluegrass in them, greens in the poorest growing environments, and at the higher end courses that have the ability to cut more often and cut lower, which tends to favor annual bluegrass as well. So these courses experience extraordinary disruption to the golf calendar, to their revenue stream, and of course, as luck would have it, it was followed by the coldest spring in history. So many courses still to this day are feeling the effect. There were a lot of greens that were not open until early to mid-July. So put that in perspective at your facility, you can imagine how devastating it was to so many different facilities. So there's always going to be that year when we're not going to be able to keep those weaker grasses alive. If you have a lot of them, you're at risk. If you have a smaller percentage of them, it could be a small bump in the road when you have one of these bad events. Fast greens are more expensive, less reliable, and at the end of the day, I don't think they're good for pace of play. That will be showing up, I think, in research that's been done this year that's not ready to be released, but it will be shortly. I'll talk more about that in a minute. If you want to think about sustainability in turf, here are some simple points. Work on growing environments, promote the more reliable species. It can be done in many different ways. But the fundamental approach is don't work quite so hard to keep the weaker grasses alive. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Give up a little bit of speed, and you can have much healthier turf and more reliable turf in the long run. I think this very old quote from Dr. McKenzie kind of sums up what I believe about golf, and that is, it's possible to have too high a degree of perfection. If we have never had a bad lie, we're not likely to appreciate a good one. Moreover, the ability to play from a bad lie differentiates between a good player and a bad one. Many golfers look at it as if it's a right, an inalienable right to have a good lie if you've hit the fairway. And that is really not what golf's about. It's about dealing with adversity and dealing with all kinds of lies, finding the ball and playing it as you find it. So, on-course sustainability, I think it can reduce cost. I think it's really about reducing inputs, perhaps reducing environmental impact. But at the end of the day, I think it's important just to remember what makes the game great. It's not pristine playing conditions. It's having more reliable turf and eliminating more of those overindulgent cosmetics. The course doesn't have to be perfect to be fun. I'm not going to talk about a pace of play today because we've got a lot of new information that will be coming out. We did a tremendous amount of research this summer, and that work the data is all being collected and analyzed as we speak. So I would invite you to come to the symposium on pace of play at Golf House in November. We held the first one last year where we presented what information we had and identified what type of research we would be doing this year. That research has been conducted to a large extent, and now we're trying to sort out what it means for individual golf courses. So I encourage you and invite you to attend the symposium. I believe it's November 11 and 12 at Golf House. If you'd like to get more information, I would encourage you to call Hunky Yun at Golf House. You can get him at our 800 number, 222-8742, or you can email him at hyun@usga.org. I think the last year's symposium was extremely informative, opened a lot of eyes, and I think this year will be even better because we've got a lot more information to share with you. With that, I will say thank you, and I don't know if anyone has a comment or a question, but I'd certainly be happy to entertain them now. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Hey, how are you? I'm a golf course superintendent in Mosholu. Been a superintendent, this is my third year at Mosholu, been in the business now for close to 20 years. And this is all stuff that we have talked about in all of our meetings, right? But this is the stuff that needs to get to the golfer. Because from what I've heard, I asked everybody about watching the USG Open, or the US Open at Pinehurst, and they hated it. All the golfers I talked to have hated it. Oh, how can you play like that? What's that lie about? You know, this is important stuff. Because they do come to the golf course and they expect that perfect lie. They expect that perfectly edge bunker. They expect it. It's the stuff they see on TV that's killing us. And I really am a firm believer in that. When they switch back to single row irrigation at Pinehurst for the Open, everybody here is going to triple wide, triple row, 5-row, irrigating every square inch to make it look like the Masters in July. And this is the stuff that's really important in my side of the business. And it's hard to get this to the golfer themselves. And if we can get this to the golfer, and I think that would be a huge part of this equation here, I believe.
I completely agree. Again, what we do for a national championship is not what we would recommend on a daily basis, and what we do for one national championship isn't something that we could do in another area of the country at another national championship. That's not the goal.
And not even what they do up the street from what we do at our place. I can't make those conditions happen either.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously paying different prices for that, but
Precisely.
on the same course, that's where you get your big bang for your buck, is what they think, Hey, I can go play a municipal 9-hole course and have greens that are rolling 11 on a Thursday in July. That's not always, this year, hey, they could. Last year, no, so.
After we got through the winter and the recovery in the spring, this was a pretty good year for growing grass, I will admit that. And I agree with everything you said. We're really working to reach out to golfers. If you look at the Green Section Record and many of the other USGA publications, we are making concerted efforts to educate golfers on all of these points. And I would encourage you to subscribe to the Record. I would encourage you to get that into the hands of your golfers. It's free. There's no reason not to. And there's many articles in the Record that are focused really on the golfer, far more so now than the superintendent in some cases. So that's the best thing we can do. And when folks watch the Open Championship and all our other championships, I hope they look at the public service announcements, because there's lots of information about what's going on the golf course and what we're intending to do. There were so many good stories to come out of Pinehurst. You can, reducing the amount of irrigated
I loved
turf.
it. I loved every inch of it. I thought it was great.
So when golfers, I've had people complain about that or other championships, but when they have it laid out, that fact that Pinehurst eliminated 40 acres of irrigated turf.
But that means nothing to the average golfer.
Right, but
to us, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
But to the average golfer, they don't care.
Millions of gallons of water, and hence the education aspect. On the Green Section website, we actually, because the water issue has become so incredibly important, we created another website, a micro website, where we have all of our water resources. And I know that doesn't resonate necessarily with everybody in the Northeast region, because we don't have a drought right now, and we haven't had one for a few years, but we're doing our best to reach out to everybody on all of these important topics. So thanks for your comments.